Hi, I'm Laura Kelley, Director of POCCA CapeCod.org. That stands for Protect Our Cape Cod Aquifer, because that's something that we all should be thinking about this day and age. Today we're here in Hyannis for the 208 Wastewater Plan presented to us by the Cape Cod Commission. You can see a lot of their videos that they put up and any information on the topic that you would like. Here is the website, capecodcommission.org/OneCape. This is just a quick little write-up of the presentations that are going on here today. I am the 11th generation born and raised on the Cape, and really believe that 11 generations are going to happen again, and the decisions and the choices that we make today are going to have a really cumulative effect on that. So please do all you can to lessen your own amount of choices of toxic chemicals on a daily basis, and that will really help lessen the amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus in the long run. We're really thinking about the future of what to do with our wastewater here on Cape Cod. We're in Hyannis, and the Commission, the Cape Cod Commission, is sharing with us the 208, their 208 wastewater plan. And with me today is Jay Colburn. Hi, Jay.
Great to be here.
Do you think this plan will turn out to be a success in the long run?
I think it will be. I think it's been a great tool to look at the science, do the assessments, but it's also been a great avenue for innovation. I think it's pretty extraordinary what the Commission has done in terms of using technology to look at tools and look at various options and really get us to the place where we're not going to sewer all of Cape Cod. We can't afford to do that. But we must act. Our aquifers are threatened, our bays and abatements are in serious trouble. We've got to act, but what this 208 plan does is I think it really gets us to start thinking outside of the box, start thinking across town boundaries, and really focusing on the regions where the problem is greatest.
True, and what they've done is they brought us to each individual cove and inlet and giving us different technologies of what to do in each place.
Right.
So there's the traditionals and the non-traditionals, and combining them together, that's where we're at, really.
Particularly because even though we are one region, there's also a lot of differences across the region. That the wastewater challenges that we face in the town of Truro, where I'm on the Board of Selectmen, are very different from the challenges that are being faced in Falmouth or in Yarmouth. But on the other hand, if we can be sharing planning tools and strategies, I think we can work together to address this as a region, but with technologies and solutions that are targeted and make the most sense for individual parts of the Cape.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, crossing boundaries, like let's say Orleans and Eastham share an abatement, having them come together and figure out how to, create that technology. I mean, that's where we're at this point as stakeholders. We're able to be a part of this plan in progress right
Absolutely.
now, right?
And we do. Even within a town, you're going to have to look at different things. So, for example, in the town of Truro, we have a fairly densely populated area, Beach Point, North Truro, which is a lot of which is on public water as part of the Provincetown Truro public water system. And we could easily look at partnering with Provincetown to use their sewage treatment plant.
Sure.
That makes sense there. Then we've got other places in Truro that aren't densely populated, and particularly with 70% of our homes in Truro are second homes and seasonally occupied. Sure. What we need to be doing there is educating and working with homeowners. One of the ideas that's been tossed out this morning is an idea of a trust fund that you would pay into, and then when your Title V fails, there's money there to replace it, and there's money there to pump it every 3 years, and it's happening to everybody, and we're not relying on our second homeowners who are only there for a couple of weeks and don't even know anything about a septic system to begin with.
Sure.
Those are the kinds of innovative solutions that we need to be incorporating and targeting where they make the most sense.
Yeah, financially, we've really got to think about the individual homeowner versus the business owners, and then through time, how much is this really going to cost us?
Right. I mean, it is going to cost, and I think, the challenge is we've kind of pretended that it's not going to cost, but we got to start thinking about the long term and thinking about the future and thinking about the quality of our water and thinking about the health of our community and our fishery, and all of that is tied to what we're flushing every day, and
right.
and we've really got to start paying attention to that now.
Yeah, like what we purchase every day really matters. And one of the things that is part of the 208 plan is lessening the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus. Like per town, every town gets credits for lessening the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus. That's fertilizers and such.
Right.
And this is going to be part of the equation with this whole entire plan. And so if we as homeowners can take that in consideration, it's really going to help on a whole. It's a big impact.
I mean, there is a huge education process here, and to try to develop a consciousness and awareness that what you flush or pour down the drain is going to end up in your water and what you drink.
True.
And so start thinking, like, those chemicals, those fertilizers, those weed killers. Do I want to eventually drink that? And if we can get people to start thinking about a lot of the problem can be solved through changes in behavior.
Yeah, simple purchasing habits. I think that's where it's at.
Yeah.
Really,
Oh.
the simple stuff. Well, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
I hope it all turns out for all of us here on the Cape.
Thanks.
Sure. Scott Horsley. I'm with Horsley Witten Group, and I'm working as a consultant to the Cape Cod Commission on the 208 plan.
And so you've been presenting?
I have today. We're doing some focused workshops, and I've been talking about this concept of a watershed team that would work with the individual watersheds to develop these hybrid plans.
Nice. How's the feeling going in general? Do you think that this plan is going to be a success at this rate?
Absolutely. I think it's going really well. I think that the stakeholders that we worked with for the past year and a half have been very connected, tied into it, and very receptive, and a lot of interest. And some of the communities are moving forward and really using this 208 information. These hybrid plans are being developed. People are very interested in the so-called non-traditional technologies. So I think it's going great.
Good. Can you give us a quick list of some of the traditional technologies?
With the non-traditional, you mean?
And non-traditional.
Okay, well, on the traditional side, we're primarily talking about centralized sewering, and also some innovative and alternative technologies that are currently accepted by Mass DEP, on-site septic systems. On the non-traditional side, it's a broad range of things. Some of the things that I think of the most interest are some of the aquaculture shellfish projects.
Yeah.
Permeable reactive barriers, which are trenches in the ground to intercept the groundwater. Constructed wetlands is something people are looking at. Eco-toilets. A whole variety of different technologies that are being considered.
And each individual cove and inlet throughout the Cape.
Right. Each one is 57 watersheds, and each one now has a plan, both a traditional and a non-traditional plan. And the intent is to come back to those watersheds working with the local officials and the watershed teams and develop what we call hybrids, which would include some traditional, some non-traditional.
And actually incorporating 2 or 3 or whatever it takes, maybe 4 of these different technologies in that cove or inlet in order to lessen the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus, right?
That's right.
An equation.
Yep,
right?
A hybrid plan would include, I would say on average, 6 or 8 technologies. And one of the ideas is to build in some resiliency. Because some people are asking, well, what happens if we put a bunch of shellfish in and they don't work? Well, in my opinion, really what they should be asking is they don't work quite as well as maybe the technology matrix suggests. In that case, they're probably still a cost-effective alternative, but the idea would be not to rely on any one technology like shellfish, but to add some shellfish, some fertigation wells, some permeable reactive barriers, and maybe a targeted downtown sewering. And together, what we're seeing is this will provide the most cost-effective approach and one that's really resilient to any changes that might occur in the future.
Adding non-technologies that are, how do I want to say, already been here before us.
Yep.
So like the trees and the plants and the oysters, through time will last longer than the man-made versions. Is that at all thought of in this process?
It is, and in fact, that's one of the underlying principles to many of these so-called non-traditional technologies. The other term we use is green infrastructure, and the idea is, and I'll use an example, one of the best technologies to treat stormwater runoff from roads is something called bioretention. Biological retention. Get the stormwater to come into an area that's vegetated using native natural plants and native soils, and that in reality that really works the best. So in many cases, a lot of these green technologies, what we're trying to do is mimic nature, try to take what Mother Nature has taught us and design it into a facility that can then help treat the water.
It'll last longer. It's more sustainable.
It's more sustainable, and generally they work better in our experience.
How about the cost factor in all of the whole two-way wastewater plan? Is this something that's going to be brought in, again, with all different levels from federal and state and local? Is there any sort of formula or...
Well, I mean, the intent, the hope, and I think the track record so far is that I think we're going to get a pretty good cost share between federal contributions, state, and local. And on the local level, I would also suggest there's probably some good opportunity for private sector and public sector share. There are examples where businesses have done, let's say, focused sewering projects that then allow collection systems to go out into the surrounding neighborhood and allow them to get hooked up. So I think we shouldn't overlook the business community as a player here. But yeah, I think there's some really exciting cost share opportunities here. In fact, they are happening. And I also think there's some significant cost savings with some of these non-traditional technologies. First cut, it looks like many of these might be on the order of half the cost on a $1 per kilogram removed basis than some of the traditional technologies. So some people ask, well, what if they don't work that well? Well, they would only have to work half as well as we think they're going to work to be equal cost to some of the.
Interesting.
So this again, there's a big upside opportunity here, and I think communities are realizing that, and we'll see.
Great. Yeah, that's it. That we're just going to have to see how all this plays out.
Yep.
We're under the gun a little bit with time factor now.
We are. As we heard last night, the Conservation Law Foundation, who brought this suit, there's a settlement currently in place that really gives us until the summer or September on the outside to get our plan finalized, to identify the Waste Management Agency, and start moving forward.
Great. Think we can do it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're rolling. We've been at this for a couple of years
I think
now.
people are pretty interested and committed to this. Like I said, the stakeholders were very involved, and I think people are recognizing that now is the time to do something different. Now is the time to take action and stop fighting about what might be the best way, and that's really the intent of this hybrid plan. We can really have it all. And I think people are starting to realize that.
Good. Well, thank you for helping and being such a big part of this, Scott.
Thanks for talking to me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it. Yeah.
The purpose of the 208 wastewater plan is to come together as townspeople, and citizens, selectmen, and work together with neighboring towns, because a lot of the watersheds are shared, to come together and figure out how to take care of our wastewater. There's so many, technologies, over a dozen or maybe even up to 20 possibilities. And it's a matter of coming together with the understanding that we all have the same goal. And there'll be so many different equations, so many different ways to get to that goal. Differences in topographies and textures of the land, and the way the towns work. There'll be so many different ways to get us there. Regardless, this is something that is very critical for our time right now. This is something that needs to be addressed. Come to the table with ideas. Get in touch with the Cape Cod Commission if you have some others than what you've seen today. Now is the time. To give a quick time frame, we have till the beginning of June to really put forth these efforts on paper, and that's really the critical phase, is the building phase. I've been a stakeholder in 4 towns for 2 years or something, and it's been an amazing growing process. I'm so impressed and completely involved with neighboring towns and all of this. It's really grown my mind to a point of new understandings and I'm going to say the criticalness of this matter and the ability that we can do this if we come together as, townspeople on all of this. So hopefully you'll get involved too. It's for all of us. This is our land. We are here to protect it, and I feel glad to be a part of this. I'm here with Christy from the Cape Cod Commission, and I was wondering, where can homeowners and other residents and visitors alike find more information about the 208 plan?
Sure, that's a great question. We've been trying to make all of this information publicly available through our website, and that's capecodcommission.org. And all of the videos that we've been showing today at the summit we'll be making available also, and they'll be available on our One Cape Summit website. So if you can go to the Cape Cod Commission site, and that will take you right to the One Cape site.
So we're really dealing with the Federal Water Pollution Control Act, commonly known as the Clean Water Act, 1972, Section 208. 208 requires that the area-wide planning agency in the development of the plan designate what they refer to as waste treatment management agencies, and then shorten to just waste management agencies, or WMAs. These are the characteristics of an entity that that EPA and the state would say are compliant. So you have to be able to do all of these things, which and it's like build, operate, manage, issue bonds, entities that have the capacity to carry out the plan. So in the draft plan, we listed every existing entity on the Cape that fit this description. So it was the 15 towns and the 13 independent districts, water districts, fire districts, water and sewer districts that already exist on the Cape. It is not the Cape Cod Commission. We do not have many of these authorities. So we pointed all of them out. EPA and DP are now saying that we have to sort of designate them as part of the plan. So we're going to do that. And to that effort, we're looking Cape-wide. But the issue is, I think the answer is practical. The 15 towns are really the ones that are best suited to be the waste management agencies. They already do everything that we need to do. The 208 plan itself is built on a lot of the town work that's already been done across the Cape. So to me, nothing else makes sense except to designate the 15 towns as WMAs. The only problem from a federal compliance with the statute is, how are you going to deal with shared watersheds? How are our communities going to come to an agreement on how they're going to move forward? And I still don't think that's necessarily a complicated thing to answer, a question to answer, because if you have 3 towns sharing a watershed and they all accept the responsibility for the percentage of the problem that they're causing, that should be enough. That, I think, when you do that, we should be able to put 15 WMAs together with agreements in those shared watersheds just at that high level, and I think it is compliant with what the federal act suggests. And so in order to do that, we have identified 5 watersheds across the Cape that most of the towns would be involved in an analysis of these 5 watersheds for this purpose. So we list them there by color. And so you can see on the outer Cape, Eastham, even though they're in the wrong room, would be part of it. So Eastham, Wellfleet, and Truro would focus on that one watershed. Now, the towns at the geographic extremes don't directly touch any of these 5 watersheds. So that's Provincetown, that's Truro. So Provincetown, Bourne. So for those 2 towns, what we're saying is, look at the 5 groups that we're going to have and associate yourself with the one that you think you're going to learn the most from. So Provincetown, for example, they might want to hang out with you guys because they're in your geographic area and there's some commonalities there. They might want to drop into the Barnstable session because Provincetown has an existing treatment facility, and so does Barnstable. So I think that flexibility there works. So what we want to do is put these teams together on a town basis, and then we want to meet in a series of 3 meetings. So really, and we have a very short time frame. So in March, what we want to do is we want to have 1 meeting, and at that first meeting, we want to talk about nitrogen load allocations, right? Because this is it. If we can assign responsibility based on a community's percentage contribution to the problem, I think that's the essence of making these designations and getting this done. There are also other definitional issues that we should tackle jointly. One of them is, like, Sandwich has 17 watersheds. But they really only have like 4 that are meaningful to them. Those are very small, or they're on federal property and not subject to their jurisdiction. So I think we want to come up with a definition of de minimis, like what communities are responsible for and in what circumstances they would not be responsible for that, as well as these nitrogen load allocations. And then in April, we want to go and have these multi-municipal teams meet and consider one watershed. And we would run through sort of a hypothetical watershed scenario development process there. Not for the purpose of solving the problem or developing a capital plan that's actually going to be implemented, but to test the different kinds of capital structures or solutions that might come out and what political problems they may present, so that we can structure agreements based on that. I think this is important. I came from the Mid-Cape session on this, and the Bass River, for example, has a very significant problem. Yarmouth and Dennis share that watershed. They have a history of
working together, beautiful.
Less than friendly relationship around educational issues, right? And rightfully, that makes them skeptical about, we don't. So I think this process should lead us to a better result. Instead of a state-prescribed format that communities have to mash themselves into, let's run through a scenario process. Let's let the community think about what some of the consequences might be, so that we wind up with fewer unintended consequences. And then in May, at the request of the Water Protection Collaborative, they asked us to put lawyers in a room. I'm not sure that's a great idea, but we'll do it, because they really want to be able to ask about, well, if we structure ourselves this way in an IMA, what does that mean? Can we do this? Is this enforceable? Is that not enforceable? So after we've gone through the first 2 meetings, this is sort of a meeting to check with an independent kind of analysis that might inform the process and tell us things that we don't know. And then after that, we're going to move to designations in June. So that's really what we're going to do. And it's sort of short and sweet, and we have a very short time frame, so fire away with questions.
I have a question about the legal representation.
Yes.
Is that going to be firms knowing about municipal law, or is it?
Yes. Yeah, and I think lawyers are one of the exceptions to 30 feet procurement issues. So we would probably look to Copeland and Page, John Giorgio, someone like that. Someone that the towns are familiar with, getting advice from on an independent level to be prepped and come.
And we're already counseled to everybody except Truro.
Yeah.
And that may change very soon.
Oh, good. Even East Ham?
No, Truro.
Roger.
In looking at towns like Wellfleet and Truro, where you have a substantial portion of the residencies in town that are located in the National Seashore,
yes.
How do we allocate that one?
That's a good question. And honestly, I don't. To the extent that the 208 plan has been successful, I think it's because we've left questions open. And the towns don't want to be lectured to. They've been doing this stuff for a long time. They have more experience than we do. So we recognize the question, but I think we have to interact with stakeholders and run through a couple scenarios.
The point is that if we're going to allocate costs in terms of housing, then we've got a special issue when you look at the National Seashore.
Yeah. You also have potential revenue streams that are federal in nature that are specific to park services and water quality issues in park services. So another advantage that might be in your favor. So that we have to do that. And it'd be great if we could figure out a way to bring the seashore into to that discussion, we will invite them, as we will invite the JBCC.
That was my question. Has the Seashore been involved in any of the stakeholder?
Yeah, they have been at some of the stakeholder engagements. The Seashore has been great as a working relationship. They collect a lot of data, water quality data up there. We work with them on that. They are just like a lot of other agencies. They don't get the money that they wish they did. And they don't get the money that we wish they did. So, but I think they'll be a partner. Yeah. Sir.
Mike Gazowski, East End Water Management Committee. Some of us
in the right room.
In the right room. More on that National Seashore. You know, we work with them a lot there in the Water Management Committee, and they've got that visitor center there. Is there any chance that they may create their own water management agency and just leave us out? Can they go about something like that?
You know, it depends, because you probably know this, but the National Seashore model that we use on the Cape was unique when it was done. It's known as the Cape Cod model. It's been used in other places like the Pine Barrens, I think, since. But it's the only Park Service that has private property interests within the boundaries. So it comes down to sort of an ownership and a jurisdictional issue around infrastructure. So it kind of depends whether those roads are public roads, whether the infrastructure to them is considered in service by the municipality and public, or whether they're private. So I think that's one of the issues that we have to vet.
And it varies by road and by town.
Yeah, and it's on the Outer Cape. So it's also an example of one of those particular issues that may come up in a very short time frame. And we may not have enough time to answer, because my suggestion would be, let's map it, right? Let's figure out infrastructure jurisdiction on the Outer Cape as it relates to the National Seashore. And we could do that project. Probably can't do it within this time frame, although maybe we could. If it already exists, we certainly can, so we can at least ask that question. But if we can't, I think some of these issues, as long as we can identify them and then take them offline, we can develop over a longer period of time the specific answer and give feedback.
Thank you.
From a legal framework, does any of this require town meeting approval or vote or authorization?
No.
Okay.
And that's
happening right now.
Yeah, no, that's why it's going to move quickly, because there has to be sort of a designation, and it's we want to hear, we have to hear from the town and the stakeholders on this so that we can structure it. But it does not require local approval. And so one of the other questions in the Mid-Cape that came up is, well, what does it mean? What would a town then, in accepting or being designated as WMA, have responsibility to carry out the plan as it relates to a schedule? And I don't think that that's the case at all. It's about accepting responsibility. There would probably be some initial sort of planning kind of effort that would have to happen first, but a lot of that we know we can do in-house and pretty quickly, and a lot of it's already been done. So it's a question of incorporating that into an agreement. And then on the basic level, if you have 3 towns that share one watershed, they all accept a methodology to assign responsibility, then I think we have the framework for a discussion that will work. I'm convinced town-wide that if that happens, that these shared watersheds will take care of themselves. Ultimately, because the towns are going to have to sort of think about how they're going to solve the problem. And they're going to have to put something in front of boards and taxpayers. At that point, there's going to be a requirement that the most efficient sort of solution is service. And I think the towns will figure that stuff out. I think there also will be some money that will be associated with some projects, especially alternative projects. So I think some of the initial investment by the towns as WMAs will come from funding that's outside of the town. So there's no risk to the tax base of that as we sort of pilot some of these technologies and start to move forward.
Well, I'm kind of struggling with, what do I do? on the way home tonight.
Yeah.
To get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Would love to kind of hear your ideas about, what do we do? Do we try to, next week, get our town administrators, select board chairs, and, staff who are working on this together and create a task force to start figuring it out? Is that a good way to start?
I think what we need are names. I think the primary responsibility is to figure out who the names you want to forward to be included in this discussion that you think will add value.
So the commission is going to support organizing these meetings.
We're going to do we're going to do it.
Okay.
We're going to support the structure of those meetings. You just need to get people that you think are going to represent the interests of the town to the meetings. Okay. So we've made some suggestions. It's got to be elected officials, appointed officials, citizens that have been engaged in the process, realtors, business community. And it's similar to the stakeholder recruitment process. But that's
or Water Resource Oversight Commission chair or Board of Health chair.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it might be that, given the way we structure it, you might want to make sure that different people are at different meetings.
Right.
Like your legal counsel in May, but you want your DPW folks there in April.
Right.
And you might want your elected officials with some of the technical staff there in March.
But I also want somebody from town hall staff at every meeting so that we've got continuity.
Absolutely. And so I don't know how.
You don't have anything else to do this spring, Pat?
It'll be over for you.
Wait a minute, I'm not supposed to supervise you.
Yeah, they know they have to split between 4 people. But, yeah.
And we'll try to make it as easy as we can. And my goal is to get the 15 towns designated as WMAs in a structure that's acceptable under the federal Water Pollution Control Act. And I don't want to go any deeper than we have to go on that, because that's just going to require more work. And we need to allow enough time for that to happen.
Wouldn't it be wise at this moment to ask the Board of Selectmen in the various communities to designate themselves?
Yes, it could be.
If you do that, then they can proceed to set up subcommittees and do anything else they want, but do it right at the Board of Selectmen level, right at the beginning.
Yeah, we could.
Yeah.
My only sort of hesitation in that is
there are all sorts of hesitations in it, Paul. I mean, I'm really saying that
we're
looking at between now and a fairly short interval.
Yeah.
And if we go to setting up subcommittees and other things, it just takes time. Whereas if we can get the selectmen to designate themselves and then put the responsibility on them to flesh themselves out,
right?
Wouldn't that move much more rapidly?
Well, I go around to the selectmen. Sometimes it's tough to get 15 selectmen meetings in a short period of time like that. And then when I feel like when we're not there and they're taking up something like this,
Well, Paul Pilcher was supposed to be at this meeting here today.
He was yesterday.
He was here last night.
Yeah, but this is the point where he should be here.
Yeah.
So, but I've considered.
Now we're doing the work.
Yeah, I've considered the Board of Selectmen option. The other thing that I sort of know, having known the 15 towns, one of them is going to say no.
Well, I'm sure, but then dump it back on them the other way.
Yeah, but I have to think that through. So if one of them says no, and I have to designate. Now I have to designate something other than a town, and that is where this whole thing gets really hairy from my perspective. So, but I'm going to think about it, Roger. It's possible to do that. So,
I mean, I'm really thinking about the way to get it done the most expeditiously. To get the designation done, then the rest of it, that you can flesh it out later, that's all.
Right. I don't think this room is going to be your problem.
No.
We're all there.
What about educating? Are you going to help out with educating homeowners at other levels?
I think that we have to, that the education is part of the implementation going forward. So once we get the designation in and the plans accepted, we can move forward with education on a homeowner level. I'm looking forward to that because we have so many different ways of reaching out to people now. We've got the film that was done in there earlier was excellent. You know, we didn't do that, but we can use that. So we can push those kind of efforts. And once we have a structure in the 208 plan to start an education program from, I think more people are going to pay attention. You know, so the plan itself, acceptance and designation of WMA is going to create another sense of urgency around this, and that there has to be an educational framework that supports that.
Another quick question. The 208 is focusing on lessening the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus.
Yes.
As you remember last fall, 8 towns took advantage of the fertilizer opportunity.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Will you help in allowing the other towns? So what does that entail? The EA?
This is, well, it's a good question. We did a Cape-wide DCPC for fertilizers only to preserve the municipal ability to adopt them because the state had taken that away. I was frankly, we had Orleans and Falmouth that were pretty far down the road. To get 8 towns that exercised that was really impressive. So that was really, that was a good thing. But it leaves the others out from the possibility. So one of the recommendations of the 208 plan should be to allow any of the Cape towns, any towns subject to a 208 plan that haven't had the option to vote local fertilizer programs to do that. Now that's probably going to require some adjustment from the legislature. Again, I think the 208 plan itself gives them, they'll do it. So yes, so we're going to go back again.
Even if it's not the town that'll take advantage of the 208, we all live about the same aquifer. We're all, I mean, it's about, on a whole, nitrogen and phosphorus. We've all got to take responsibility for this. So can it be regardless of the towns?
No. But that's it. All the towns on the Cape are subject to a 208 plan. So we're all going to, what I'm not going to do is cross the moat and try to deal with the rest of the state, because that, to the extent that we need the legislature to act, that's where this one's being recorded too. That's so I don't think we're going to do that, you know, because I just think that opens up, that makes this effort a lot more difficult. The state has been more than willing to, and legislative delegation has been great on it, and the legislature's been good on allowing us sort of special circumstances down here given the nature of the problem. And so I think we'll be able to get that designation that way. And the other thing you're going to hear about, if you haven't heard about it already, is what are sort of the other next steps in water quality programming. And so from the Commission's perspective, we have been transitioning from an organization that was primarily a regulatory agency when I took over 7 years ago to one that does more comprehensive planning and support of that on the local level. So I want to continue that transition. We're going to do that through a new regional policy plan. And I think that we can, and we have the resources to start to incorporate a water quality program that has different issue areas on an annual basis, but every 5 years sum totals a new plan. So fresh water and ponds and phosphorus is the next issue for us after nitrogen. So I think fertilizer discussions are important now. I think they're going to continue to be important. And I think as we start to educate and collect information on fresh water, it's going to become even more central. Okay. Goes so quickly. Are there any other questions? No? Awesome.
I can keep going. What about, I know it's not talked about for the 208 at this point, but just the commission in general and the near future, let's say. How about looking at pesticides?
Yeah. We, as you sort of, I think, know, we're engaged in the pesticide discussion. That is tightly controlled by the by agricultural interests and agricultural agencies on the state level and on the federal level. So we've been less effective there. But What I would say is that to the extent that the Cape as a region, I mean, given the relatively small population that we have here statewide, we've been able to leverage a lot of special consideration from the Commonwealth. And so coming together on a 208 plan, addressing in an innovative way the nitrogen problem, taking on freshwater and phosphorus next, gives us much more legitimacy in dealing with even the more thorny issues like pesticides. So it's really a step-by-step approach. So I'm hopeful that we will get to a position where we can be more influential on the issue of pesticides and other emerging contaminants of emerging concern. So I think we're just about done.
Great. Thank you. Can I ask a question?
No.
Well, then if you're going to move back to the other
when you say education is needed, are you saying like education about the 208 process, or education about the problem, or education about what individuals can do? What sort of education do you think is needed?
Yeah, all levels. So down to the nitty-gritty details of homeowners when we purchase things. Yeah, all the way up to what are we doing here today? There's a wide range that we're learning. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, and there's a huge gap.
So I hear you saying like solutions, individual solutions up to municipal and regional solutions. And do you feel people understand the problem well enough, or they still need more education?
I don't think people understand the problem.
No.
Particularly when you think about a town like Truro or Wellfleet, and I don't know what your percentage is, but in Truro we're 70% non-resident taxpayers, and so how do we engage those people for the very brief time they're here and don't want to engage, and most likely come from a place where none of this is something they ever even thought about. Talking about the 208 plan is not what we need to do. What we need to be talking about is you're drinking what you're flushing, and so think that through when you're going up and down the aisles of the supermarket or going to the garden center.
And the challenge on education becomes more difficult the more that we are sponsoring decentralized solutions, right? Because it is individual homeowner action that's impacting this. So if you live in a big city, they just sewer everybody, then who cares? They don't know what the problem is. They don't care. They never will, because there's a larger governmental agency that's taking care of that. To the extent that we want people to be educated about what they're putting on their lawns, it's a different strategy. But I think as part of the 208 implementation, developing different educational strategies that are more effective for the target populations is definitely something we could do. We can get to second homeowners, and we can get to them with information that's not 208 plan, this is great. We can get to them like, when you show up for 4 months out of the year, don't do this to your lawn, because it's bad.
But it's also called visitors, like come here, that are unfamiliar with the region. I think that's the challenge. Is educating those folks, because they're here on vacation. I don't care. I don't care what I put down. The same with
at a time, but I thought like this branding you're doing here, one case, I think is great.
Yes.
So I think like putting stickers on products that are call them 1K products that are considered safe, that the visitor can come and stuff like that. You gotta.
I think it's a great idea, and branding of this approach is part of the solution. So I think that's great. But thank you for your time.
Here with Orleans resident Jim McCauley. You've been a part of this process since the beginning?
Yes, 208 with all their meetings on the Lower Cape in Orleans, and then the Orleans process, which is described as our Orleans miniature version of the 208, which is, it's amazing. There are 400 people here today. In the Orleans meeting, they meet for 4 hours every other week. There are 50 people on every meeting all the time. It's amazing how much effort people are putting into this.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Are your thoughts as optimistic as Scott's were? Do you feel this is going to work out in the end?
The good news here is there's generally an acceptance that we have to do something. It's a big issue. We're moving forward. There's still, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be cheap. We have the settlement. One of the groups that's here today is Conservation Law Foundation. They've got a settlement with the EPA. So we've got DEP, Mass DEP, US EPA, Conservation Law Foundation. I think that settlement will provide pressure on the towns, but it's not at all clear how that's going to work. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of questions about that, but I believe that will push us. But it's a lot of money, it's a lot of stuff, and it's going to be a lot of work left.
Can you describe to us a little bit about this lawsuit?
So I'm not the expert on that, but Conservation Law Foundation, who was instrumental in the original lawsuits to clean up Boston Harbor that resulted in the mass water resource, several years ago, maybe 10 years ago, they filed suit against the Environmental Protection Agency saying they weren't doing enough to clean up the waters on Cape Cod. What then happened was that triggered about 2 years ago this entire 208 process. So they're responsible for this entire 208 process. Within the last 2 weeks, there's been approval by the courts of a settlement between Conservation Law Foundation and the Environmental Protection Agency that basically says that everybody on the Cape is going to use the 208 process, which is being completed now, as the basis for moving forward over the next 10 years or next really as much as 40 years. By September 15th, or on September 15th of this year, the Environmental Protection Agency will need to accept that, in fact, we are moving forward, and a key aspect of that agreement is the creation of Wastewater Management Agency or agencies that will help monitor the process moving forward. The expectation is that will be the towns, but really I think what they're looking for is some level of assurance that we're going to move forward, because honestly the Cape's been talking about this for a long time.
Right. And there's one thing to implement this, and there's another thing to monitor it afterwards.
Monitoring is something that I know I've been harping on for, I think that's easily a fair word, for the last year. We're looking for, monitoring is surprisingly complicated, and there's a lot of it going on. There's monitoring that's done by Center for Coastal Studies of the salt waters of the estuaries around the Cape, and they do a great job at that. Every alternative technology, actually any pilot project that you do, or any project that you do, will have monitoring to see that it's effective, see that it's working. What we're particularly concerned about, I represent the Orleans Pond Coalition, what we're particularly concerned about is the freshwater ponds. We've got a lot of people that have been monitoring. We have 10 years of data, and we're looking to develop an overall strategy to develop kind of a common database, a clearinghouse, a little bit more discipline, so we can take advantage of all the work that's being done. We asked about that. They're talking about an additional similar process to focus on freshwater ponds, and one of the things that came up earlier today was I'm hoping to push them to launch processes to do that pilot, the monitoring of the saltwater ponds, because we've got people that have the data, they're dying to get going, and they're sitting in a lot of meetings. We can't ask them to sit in more meetings. So, one of the additional points that's just as important, the Commission is forming teams to help towns throughout the Cape monitor or execute on this process. One of the things we spoke about in our session earlier is What we really need help is, and your efforts will be part of that, is a communications outreach program. Rich Delaney described it. He said, you know, we've got 400 people here, and that's great. We've got another couple 100,000 people that ultimately, one way or the other, have to help us execute this. How do we get the message out? How do we get people on board? And that's really an area that we need to figure out how to handle that.
Yeah, because we all live here. We're all above an aquifer, and it's time to get involved. This is our opportunity. What do we have, till June 15th or something to give points of views, options, ideas, thoughts?
June 15th, they're going to identify the wastewater management agencies. I can't imagine how they're going to do that. That's a challenge.
Yeah.
And then the September 15th, within Orleans, I believe, and what Paul Niswicki has said, is this really is our last chance to do it on our own before the regulators force us to do it. So I'm optimistic about, very near term, about Orleans, because Orleans has spent months on this effort. We've got a big town meeting coming up. We think we're getting closer to consensus, and we hope with the effort that the Commission has done, with the effort that Orleans has done, with the specter of the settlement hanging, being out there, that we'll finally be able to get past some of the roadblocks we've run into the last couple of years. And if we do that, I think that will speak to the success of the 208 process, and it will help assure the EPA that they should agree to the settlement.
Wonderful.
It's my theory.
Good. Well, I hope it comes true. Hope it comes true
Very
for
good.
all of us. So,
thanks for what you're doing.
Hey, look, back again with Scott. I was wondering how you felt about today's, what's the outcome of all of this? Was there good impressions by people? What's the feedback that you've been receiving?
Yeah, I think it's going really well. I think people are having really good ideas, things we hadn't anticipated, which is good. And people seem very engaged. There's a lot of subjects on the table. It's complicated, like this waste management agency thing, but I think people are certainly starting to think about it and coming up with some interesting ideas. And yeah, I think it's going great.
I liked how the groups were with 4 or 5 towns together. So we just did break-up sessions, I guess they're called.
Yeah.
And so the Outer Cape was together, and so we were able to listen to our own local selectmen as well as stakeholders in the same room with the same topics.
Yeah, I think it was great that the groups were put together in multiple towns in a room, and it facilitated that discussion. They've always been good at that throughout the whole stakeholder process, but I think it was nice to see them together and exchange ideas, and definitely I think there's a lot of presumption that they're going to have to work together and that they want to.
Right. So what about education? Education is going to be the key to this being a successful plan.
Yep. Yeah, that point was made big in a couple sessions, education and outreach. Somebody made the point that we got 300 or 400 people here, which sounds like a lot of people, but there's about 200,000 people that are missing that live here in the Cape. Right. And a lot of this stuff is going to have to be implemented by the homeowner, by the business owner, by voters, by people that serve on local boards. So there's an enormous challenge to get this understanding and this commitment that we're hearing here today out to all those other people. So I think that one thing we have to keep thinking about is how to get that message out. What you're doing here today is a great example of that. Yeah. So, and my view as a part-time educator, part of that's a key part of this whole thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Was the Cape Cod Times here today by any wild chance? Did you notice? It'd be great to have a page or 2 or 3.
Exactly. I honestly haven't noticed any media other than you guys here.
No
so
kidding. All right,
congrats
LCTV. Shout out.
But they may be here, I'm not sure.
Do you feel as though with the feedback that you received last night, we were also here, and today, that more people are going to get involved? Like these people will go out seeking more outreach?
I hope so, and I think a lot of people realize that they need to take the message home. In fact, one of my sessions asked, what do I do on the drive home tonight? Which I thought was a great question. And I think that's the way they should be thinking. Like when they leave here, not just go to their favorite TV program or whatever, but think about what they're going to do with this information and commitment. And, you know, there's a lot they can do. So
sure. And no matter what level we're at, that was the selectman, by the way, I believe.
Okay.
And so no matter what level we're at, even me as a stakeholder or a homeowner, I mean, there's so many different levels. There's so many different ways we can help the situation.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, some of this goes right to your home. Everybody here has an option to put in a composting toilet or a urine diversion toilet, which can be done not quite tomorrow because you need to get a permit and you need to get a plumbing permit, but literally there are things that could be done. People could re-examine their fertilizer application.
Exactly.
They don't need a regulation in place to do that. Homeowners can do that on their own. And frankly, you know, I mean, it's interesting to think about this, but homeowners could solve this entire problem voluntarily at home.
Ooh.
Which is interesting, you know, when you think about it in terms of lawn care and wastewater. I'm not saying it's simple, transforming because I've been trying to do it in my house, transforming your Title V system into an eco toilet is not a simple matter, but it is doable. And that would not require, like I say, any regulating, so I think that's an extreme. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm just saying it illustrates the possibility of what can be done by residents.
Right, and that includes products that we purchase.
Sure.
Of course, what we do outside our lawns.
Yep.
What goes down our drains.
Yep.
It's just changing purchasing habits.
Yep, thinking a little bit more carefully about what are in those products, not only nitrogen, phosphorus, but a lot of the so-called emerging contaminants, being aware of that. And I think these, again, individual shifts can be a big part of it.
Is that something maybe the commission could put on their website? Maybe alternatives or what not to purchase or what not to look for?
Well, I don't know if they've gotten that specific, but I think the message about, you know, involvement all the way from homeowners to businesses to communities to watershed-wide is there. And I think that certainly the message, the details about what products to use, I'm not sure is there, and I'm not really sure it's an appropriate thing maybe for the commission to do.
True.
But I think certainly trying to educate people that they do have options, and there's certainly good information out there on the web with a lot of other organizations on product choices and so forth.
Do you think that we'll be able to come together with all the decisions and choices that we have and the time frame that has been given to us?
I'm an optimist, so I'll say yes, and I'll also say that, you know, to my knowledge, there is, when you say time frame, there is some time frame this summer and September for the formation, identification of waste management agencies. So that's a time frame. But I think that the time frame for implementation is a little still out for discussion. We've been talking about a 20-year, 30-year, 40-year planning horizon because it's going to take time to implement.
And we'll probably do some test sites?
Definitely going to do some test sites, and I think EPA is stepping up to the plate, the state's stepping up to the plate to fund some of these pilot projects.
Yeah.
And I've been, as you know, I've been really a big supporter of these in terms of getting some of these alternative technologies tested, because I really think they will work. And in my view, even if they don't work, to me that means they don't work quite as well. And again, in many cases, that might mean they're still cost effective. So I'm very optimistic about it, and I think that, you know, the more pilot projects we can get going, the better off we'll be.
Yep, and then we will know. Then we will be able to fill in the equations, and that won't be as vague. So that's something we have to look forward to.
Yeah.
Is that like the next step, do you think?
That's one of the next steps.
I mean,
as I said, some people got to be working on this institutional issue of the Waste Management Agency, but I think the people who are doing planning, watershed planning, should be, and they are identifying potential sites for these pilot projects. And
wonderful.
I think we're starting to see this develop. I think there's dozens of these projects in the planning and design phase right now. So I think in the next year or two, we'll see some real stuff happening.
Well, thanks for sharing more thoughts with us
All right.
today,
Thanks again, Laura.
Good luck with everything. Thanks for joining us here today on this very important issue, wastewater. We all need to get involved. Each one of us does matter. We have a lot of responsibility, and we can all do this together. It's really important, and now is the time. So thanks for joining us, and look forward to new shows in the near future.